Hey everyone, welcome to another Crusade raid video, and this is going to be my final team for the Valentine Julius boss. Now, there's a lot of nuances to this boss, and I'll have to explain a few mechanics to which is the things that I had to sort of plan around when designing the team. It took me a little while to figure this out as well. I think this boss is actually one of the more difficult ones that we've had recently, just due to how many things that you have to watch out for on her skill kit. So I want to talk about some of the skills. I won't talk about every single one. I just want to point out some of the important ones. Now, the first one is her attack pattern is actually she hits the main target, whoever the first enemy in the same row is, and then the units behind it. Right? It doesn't really matter too much on this boss because I'm not using a taunt unit. But if you are using a taunt unit, you do have to keep that in mind. Then when she attacks, she'll stun the target for 6 turns, and that's very important. You will notice that here I'm using 3 units in the first row, and I'm basically deliberately letting them all get hit. And the stun means that I have to make them move later in the turn if I want them to move, right? So we'll get into that a little bit more once we go over the rest of the turn ordering. But that stun is something you have to keep in mind. And then she also has this purification guard. I don't know exactly what this does because it doesn't give me like a pop-up that shows you like the effects, but it seems like it reduces the damage that it takes for the first six turns at the start of the round, which means that you need your DPS units to move as late as possible, right? Basically at the end of the turn order, and you can't have too many units die either for the like overkill damage. Then she also has this dispel thing. I think this is not correctly worded because I was experiencing something strange with this. Now, it triggers once per turn, and it should only affect the first unit that attacks on your turn. But it seemed like if I was putting my DPS too early in the turn order, it was stripping all the buffs on the unit, even though it shouldn't, right? But it seemed like it was doing that. But once I moved the unit back in the turn order towards the end, it seemed to be working fine and not dispelling my DPS's buffs. So I think there's something wrong here, but I'm not 100% sure. That's something I was experiencing, right? So those are the main mechanics of the boss that I needed to look out for when positioning all the units and ordering them, right? Now let's go over all the units that I'm using here. So first off, we've got Transcendent Illya, then we've got Zhaowu, we've got Nei, 4 is Monica here, and then Aevati, and then that will buff Mel on number 6. 7, we've got Kossgard doing the fragile debuff, of course. Number 8, we've got Maybelle, buff single target buffing Valentine Julius. Now, I'm specifically using Maybelle here because there's like 2 reasons. 1, she buffs mobility, which is great because Julius scales off mobility, and you can't get 100% mobility without buffs or cores, right? But obviously, if I'm trying to maximize damage, I want to run 2 attack cores, like 1 flat attack, 1 percentage attack. So to get the rest of the mobility, I want mobility buffers. Thankfully, Maybelle does that, and also Zhaowu also buffs mobility. This actually overcaps your mobility, but the alternative to running Maybelle would be running Maria, right? But Maria reduces your mobility, right? Whereas Maybelle buffs it, right? And if I can find it here, so this one, right? Now you technically could offset it a bit with the Zhaowu, but it's not enough with just Zhaowu by herself. In addition, there's also Monica, who I'm using to double buff these 2 units and also to reduce the health of the Aevati. But Monica also reduces the mobility, right? If I can find it here. So she also does that. So if you combine both Maria and Monica, it's like minus 60% mobility. It's a significant amount. And therefore, instead of doing that, I ran Maybelle and Zhaowu, which allows you to still maintain 100% mobility, right? Otherwise, if you even reducing it down to like 90%, it means you're doing 90% of her normal damage, right? Just due to the way that it multiplies. So you don't want that to happen. So that's why I'm using Maybelle there. Now, also I'm sacrificing both Maybelle and Kossgard because this is only going to be a 2-round battle. And because both Kossgard and Maybelle, their debuffs, or Kossgard's debuffs, and then both of their buffs last for 12 turns, that will be enough time to have both Mel and Julius benefit from those buffs and debuffs for the rest of for those 2 rounds, right? So I don't need them to survive into the second round, and therefore I can sacrifice them. But obviously, if I ran only no cores on them, they will just die on the first round. Because of that, I've got them on HP cores. So both Kossgard and Maybelle have enough HP to survive the first round, and then they'll die on the second one. Illya also has HP here to survive. I want her to stay alive because I want her to double buff her overcap crit damage. This will allow me to get an extra 100% crit damage on both Mel and Julius on the second round. Because the cap is 1000 crit damage, but each buff of Illya adds an extra 50% at rank 10 at least, anyway. Okay, so that is them. And then also we've got Zhaowu. Zhaowu will buff her EX because 2 units will have died, right? Because Illya is going to move first on the second round, and then the boss will move and kill 2 units. This will allow both Zhaowu, Nei, Monica, those 3 will trigger their EX's abilities because they all trigger based off having 2 units being killed. And then Aevati will have her health reduced below 50% after the second round because Monica does 2 buffs, right? She needs to do two of her buffs to reduce the health enough on Aevati to allow her to trigger her EX, and that means we will fully buff both Julius and Mel, right? And that will cap them out for the second round. This is very important for Mel because her damage is snapshotting, right? For her debuffs. So she has 2 marks, which is like the Sand mark and the Vengeance Distorted. The boss will have the Vengeance Distorted applied if she's below 50% after the initial attack, which will happen with Mel's damage on round 2. And then we're going to have Julius overkill the boss, right? Now, her initial hit won't actually kill the boss, but she'll trigger her EX, which this one will trigger after 50% as well. So this is also another tricky thing to sort of manage with the 2 DPS, right? You need on round 1 not to do too much damage that the boss goes below 50% straight away. Otherwise, you're going to trigger the Julius. And it needs to be below 50% after round 1 so that Mel will apply her second mark, right? So that's why we're killing the boss on the second round. Otherwise, it's too tricky I don't think it's even possible to do a third round, which allows Mel to reduce the health down to as low as possible, and also allows Julius to overkill. It just doesn't work. At least I couldn't find a way to make that work, right? Now, another little nuance here is that Aevati has to move before Mel, and that means I can't use Kossgard to apply the Fragile before Mel moves. But technically, I could swap it around and just sacrifice Aevati's first buffs which means that both Mel and Julius will miss out on that on the first round, right? Because if I had to directly buff Kossgard, right? Let's say I swap around like this, right? So this way, Aevati's buffing here basically does nothing on round 1, but after Kossgard dies, it will then buff Mel and Julius so that I still have the EX ability buffing them on round 2, but it wasn't doing enough. It was doing less damage if I did it like this, so I just sort of had to just swap it around like this, right? Unfortunately, I couldn't really figure out a way to sort of maximize that any further, right? And yeah, that is pretty much it. As I said, the debuffs will last until Julius' second hit, and yeah, we'll play the battle and then we will show the score at the end. I will talk through a little bit of this as we go. I'll have to slow it down, otherwise it goes too quickly. But first we got the Illya buff, first one. Then we got the normal buffs. Oh, sorry, we'll get hit here. And because the Kossgard and Maybelle are late in the turn order, the stun will run out, right? Because the boss does stun for 6 turns. But because they're moving on turn 7 and 8, the stun will wear out by the time they move, and that is enough for them to get their stuff off. Now Mel's applying a bit of like chip damage and applying the first side mark, right? But that mark is it's snapshotting, but it's not doing like crazy amount. It's a pretty significant amount, but not as much as you would hope for. But now we've got Julius doing her normal damage here, so it's just under 300k here. Second buff from Illya, and now we're going to sacrifice the 2 supports here. We no longer need them. Illya will survive. That's fine. It doesn't really impact it too much there. And now all our EXs will now trigger, right? That was like super buff Mel. I will show you that she is capped now. On the first round, they're nowhere near capped, right? On the first round, Mel is about 600 crit damage, and I believe Valentine Julius is 800 crit damage. But now they're fully capped. She's got the 2 overcap buffs from Illya, which makes it 110%. Also, the boss will have Fragile here. I'll just double check it here. So there's a Siamak and then the Fragile, right? So there's 3 turns, and then we got Julius moving straight after. Well, she will move straight after on the second round. So now we chunk the boss down a fair bit with Mel, and now Julius is still capped on everything, right? And the boss will still have 2 turns of Fragile, so everything's still there, and she's fully buffed. And now she's gonna chunk the boss down. It doesn't kill initially, but the EX will kill it off. Right? That's where you get the overkill. So that plus all the 2 marks popping off is how we get the 3 millions total score. Times by 3, it's a 9 mil score. So that was the highest I could figure out to get the boss to this point. So yeah, that is it for this video. Hope that is a bit insightful, a little bit different to some of the previous bosses because there's so many little mechanics that you have to play around with. But yeah, that is it for this video. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.